When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: teeth. User: UMB09X. Posted July 16, 1996.
After my sister died, Mom was never the same. She was either at work or sleeping, just withdrew in a sea of grief. And for years, I hated her for it. Was I not good enough? What happened to Mary was horrible, sure, but I'm still here. Love me, goddammit. I still need you. But that never happened. So when I turned 18, I got the fuck out. I never planned on coming back, but when they found her slumped at the dining table, TV still playing, a crusted plate of food next to her, I was the only one they could call. No funeral, no friends, just me and this house full of silence. I got in after dark. The porch light was on, and that was strange anyway. She always hated leaving it on. Electricity costs money, she'd scold me. But there it was, burning like an open eye. Inside, the house was just as I remembered. Carpet stiff with age, furniture wrapped in plastic, a TV tray with a yellowed crossword still half filled. Mary's door was shut, and my room was empty. Everything of mine had been cleared out, not boxed up, just gone. Mary's room, though, still had her name on the door in glitter stickers, peeling at the corners, like the house had been waiting for her to come back. I shouldn't have gone in there, but you know how grief moves. It's not a straight line, it's a loop. And when you walk the same loop enough times, sometimes you open the wrong door, literally even. The closet was just as I remembered, small, dusty, filled with a few old dresses and a single box I didn't recognize, wooden, heavy, covered in years of dust. I opened it. Inside were smaller boxes, neatly tied with twine, labeled in Mom's handwriting. Mary, hair, ages 3 to 9. Each bundle of hair was carefully ribboned, like she was cataloging specimens, not memories. Birthday cuts, hospital stays, one marked last day. The next box read, Mary, teeth. A full set of baby teeth, resting in cotton, polished, labeled, arranged by order lost. I'm not gonna lie, that made me sick to my stomach, but there was one more box, buried beneath the others. It had my name, teeth and hair. Not my baby, not my child, just categorized. And inside, the same thing. My baby teeth, my hair, even the pieces I dyed black at 17, all saved and all separated. But taped to the lid was a note. Insurance. in case she goes too. That's when something snapped inside of me. I don't remember knocking over the box, but I remember the sound of something rolling across the floor, and I remember looking up and seeing the mirror, my reflection, and someone else behind me, smiling, her teeth looking just like mine. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the closet door swinging slow and soft, like someone had been holding it a second ago. I slept in Mom's room that night. Couldn't bring myself to sleep in mine. Couldn't even say why. Well, the old baby monitor on her nightstand was still plugged in. After all these years, I didn't even know she'd kept it. At 2:17 a.m., it crackled. Not the TV, the monitor. There was a voice, a child's voice, coming through that little, gnarly speaker. I want my hair back. I sat up straight, heart like a drum, TV still playing quietly. You weren't supposed to stay. She picked me. I ripped the plug out of the wall, but the voice kept coming, buzzing from the little beige speaker like a wasp hive in plastic. I threw it. Next morning, I opened the attic. I had to climb a rickety step stool and push the hatch up with my shoulder. The air that came down was cold and syrupy, like rot cut with roses. The attic was a shrine. There were photos of Mary, hundreds of them. Some I remembered, some I didn't. Some had my face, but the name scribbled underneath said Mary. In the middle of it all was a rocking chair. And in the chair, something that looked like Mary, maybe a mannequin, maybe something worse, pale skin, brown hair, long and glossy, that same dress she died in. Her head was tilted, her mouth fixed open in a soft, wide smile, too wide. Inside the mouth was something pink, soft, wet, a tongue. Clutched in her hands, tied in a red ribbon, was a lock of my hair, fresh. Then her head twitched. "You stayed too long," she said, voice syrupy and low. "She was only ever meant to borrow you." Well, I ran. Down the ladder, through the hall, past the closet where the boxes had spilled across the floor, but the labels were different now. Mary, whole. My name, returned. I did not take a damn thing. Didn't even turn off the lights. I left the house as the sun broke the trees, but that next night in my apartment, far away from that place, I heard the monitor again. Buzzing, crackling, and then her voice. "I still have your teeth."
Subject, Territorial. User, Null4Burr. Posted, May 27, 1998.
When you've had the same job for 10 years, having to look for work again is a colossal pain in the ass. What makes it especially difficult for me is that I never went to college, so to look at my resume, a prospective employer would think, this guy got out of school and then worked the front desk of a hotel for 10 years. He's functionally useless for anything that doesn't involve handing guests a pen to write their name with. And sure, the first part is right in that just out of high school, I blundered into a great job at Newmarket Manor, where I stayed for 10 years. What they're wrong about is the kind of work that job entailed, because checking guests in and answering phones was the least of it. Over the course of a decade, I became the Newmarket's chief troubleshooter, effectively managing the place, even though my official title never changed. Had they done that, they might have had to pay me more, and if they'd actually listened to me when it counted, the place might not have burned down. Newmarket Manor was one of those grand old homes built by a coal baron to house what was meant to be generations of his family. However, in this case, that coal baron, Leonard Corden, had particularly useless offspring who blew through his fortune at an impressive speed. My bosses, Mike and Eleanor, picked the place up for a song in the 80s and turned it into Newmarket Manor, the name having nothing to do with the history of the property. Eleanor thought it sounded like old money splendor and hoped that would be the kind of clientele it attracted. It did not. That's not to cast aspersions on our guests who, despite being mostly lovely people, were vacationers from the Midwest and not the white shoe set. When I came on board in '85, the manor had been running as a hotel for about 4 years, and people still called it the Old Corden House. Back then, if a passing tourist asked someone local where they might find a haunted house, 9 out of 10 people would point toward the hotel. It had been sitting empty for so long that the effort Mike and Eleanor had put into repainting its peeling blue exterior and repairing its intricate gingerbread trim, not to mention evicting the raccoons and roaches from its battered interior, barely registered. It took a lot of careful work on the PR front to change perceptions of the new market, but we got there. To my surprise, the most important part of that process was hiding the fact that the place was actually haunted. It's impossible to say who or what was haunting the place. All I knew for sure was that if the front desk phone rang after, say, 9:30, you could be sure it was someone asking why they could hear breathing in their otherwise empty room. I spent a good 4 hours knocking out a list of potential excuses for night staff to tell guests when I wasn't around. Faulty air conditioning or heating, insulation settling, off-gassing from new mattresses. When people are scared, they'll believe just about any comforting thing you tell them, and that was usually the end of the matter. If whatever was in there happened to be in a playful mood, you get a second phone call about the TV or bathroom faucet turning itself on, requiring a fresh set of carefully calculated excuses. There was never a third phone call, not once. If things persisted, it always ended the same way. A frantic guest in some manner of undress running up to the desk babbling about the hooded man. You only ever got this a couple times per year, mostly in October, and when it happened, you very calmly apologized to the guest and gave them the blue room. It was a small room on the west side of the house, and for whatever reason, the one room our unknown resident never approached. Even when we had a full house, you left the blue room empty just in case. It was a good system, until it all fell apart. I suspect the change was brought about by Eleanor trying to develop the old Corden family bowling alley in the basement into a banquet space. Despite it running almost half the length of the hotel, it had sat completely untouched the entire time I'd worked there. It had this strange effect on people, almost like you'd forgot it existed until you were walking past the doors on the way to cold storage. As soon as it was out of sight, it just faded from your awareness. Or at least it did until Boss Lady got a bee in her bonnet about leaving money on the table and sent me down there to assess the space. In all of the 10 years I'd worked there, I'd come to accept the place was haunted, even if I never once saw or felt the spirit that liked to bother our guests. I certainly never felt unsafe. Down in that bowling alley, though, I felt unsafe, like I'd wandered into the home of a very territorial animal. The lanes were intact, the floor surprisingly well kept considering how long it had been left to molder. It was the corners that weren't right. No matter how many lights you turned on, the darkness collected there like iron fillings on a magnet. I felt a pressure on my chest the moment I entered, and it grew with every passing moment. The back of my neck prickled. It took less than 5 minutes for me to run out of there, tail between my legs. For days afterward, I dreamed of the bowling alley and the darkness that gathered there. Nothing ever spoke to me in those dreams, but following each one, I became more and more certain that this was the one place in the hotel we couldn't touch. Whatever haunted it had retreated there, ceding the space to the living except for the handful of provocations we fielded every year. If we wanted to maintain a balance in Newmarket Manor, the bowling alley had to stay the way it was. Eleanor wouldn't hear a word of it. She was almost never on the property to begin with, so the day-to-day running of the place was, at best, theoretical to her. Anything resembling the supernatural may as well have been happening on another planet. It didn't matter one whit that I'd had to design an entire process to deal with disturbed guests, a process which included setting a whole room aside for emergencies. The bowling alley project began in late September last year, and sure enough, the presence's intrusions into the rest of the house ramped up at the same time. 3 nights running, we had guests straight up leave the hotel after something rushed them from the corners of their rooms. Then, 2 days before Halloween, the basement smoke alarm went off and we had to evacuate. In 2 hours of looking, the fire department couldn't find any reason for the signal and we moved guests back in. Eleanor blamed the whole thing on the contractors, claiming they'd screwed up the electrical work somehow. They were fired, putting a stop to the work for the next 2 weeks. Unsurprisingly, the balance returned to the rest of the house without a single visit from the presence. Looking back, I can see that the alarm was a warning shot, one that went unheeded. 2 weeks later, a new contractor was found and work on the bowling alley resumed. The next fire alarm was very real. The night it happened was supposed to be my first shift of the week after 2 days off. Usually on my Mondays, I woke up around 2 in the afternoon and puttered around the house until it was time for work at 5. That day, though, I felt like I was moving through molasses, and an hour before my shift was due to start, I was so exhausted I had to call one of the new hires to cover me. As soon as that call was over, I collapsed back into bed and a dreamless sleep. When I woke up the following morning, the fog of the previous day had passed and I was unemployed. The latter fact wasn't obvious to me at first, and it says a lot that I didn't find out until the firefighter manning the blockade at the bottom of the Newmarket sloping driveway filled me in. Sometime after 11, he said, a fire had started in the kitchen and spread quickly around the hotel. Thankfully, we'd had an empty house, so the only person who needed to evacuate was the night shift clerk who'd taken my shift. When I asked the firefighter how bad the damage was, he gave me a look of sympathy. The hotel was gone, he said, burned to its foundations. Better brush up that resume, kid, is how he put it. So here I am, doing just that.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.